What I'm going to do is we have a presentation which dates to February 28, 2018, and the reason is because this was presented to the Ministry of Commerce, so they've already seen it. What I intended to do was to go over it and draw some inferences from it, and of course with the constraint of time, I'll try to be brief. So just to start off, first of all, from the Pakistan Business Council side, we're very appreciative that the Ministry of Commerce has been quite proactive, and there were recommendations that BBC has been making, particularly on our negotiations with China and how to draw better benefits from our FTA. And it's been heartening to see that those negotiations have been pulling along well, and we will be getting some better lines of, concessional lines for our products. So and of course, will put us in a better position vis-a-vis ASEAN. So that's one. Secondly, what BBC really kind of proposes is that a trade policy is not in itself a policy that will lead our economy to its heights that it deserves. Of course, policies have to be intertwined, and policies are multi-pronged, and so different policies have to act together to work together. So in that perspective, of course, trade and investments are the two main drivers of growth. So the trade policy and the investment policy both are what is going to drive the future path that we will move on. But having said that, other policies which include, for example, the fiscal policy, the energy policy, the agriculture policy, and the labor policy, for example, all of these have to feed into these two main policies. So first of all, let's, I would try to draw out this kind of a map to say that if we want to move in a direction that we want to, we have to start coordinating the initiatives that come in from different departments and ministries of the government. And perhaps one of the suggestions that came out was the Prime Minister having the coordinator role and bringing all of these initiatives into unison is something that really jives well. So in my presentation, I will be drawing some tangents on how different departments can work together and how they could be crossly linked with each other in driving some of the initiatives that we are proposing. Of course, another key aspect that we want to be mindful of, that yes, our exports are very narrow. The list of items that we export from, if I have my numbers right, 57 product lines count for about 94 or odd percent of our total export value globally. So if we're just exporting 57 key lines of products, well, let's start working on increasing the number of products that we produce. And for doing that, investment policy is very important. So that drives my point. Okay, so as far as the Pakistan Business Council is concerned, we promote 4 key policy thrusts. One, we need to draw policies. We need to create policies which create more jobs. So we need policies which create more jobs. We need actions, like Dr. Waqar Saab mentioned, which will produce more export surplus. And that can, I'm sorry? No, I haven't started. Right. So we need more export surplus, and for that also export competitiveness. So we need to be more competitive. We need more value added. We need to have more value addition in our economy. I've heard voices here speaking about import substitution. We can talk about that. The benefit of having a forum like this is the diversity of voices. So yes, economies have gestated and nurtured their industry so that the industry can grow to a point where they're globally competitive? I think yes. Even in examples of, for example, India was quoted as an example. India's reform process was very gradual and it wasn't done in a day. So I think that consciousness has to be in our kind of minds. And of course, the tax system reform goes without saying. The fiscal policy is so important to improve our tax system. So I'm going to just quickly, kind of go through the slides. So, for example, so I would start by saying these are the key contours of what the Pakistan Business Council is looking at. One, we are a landlocked. We've been in a cyclical cycle whereby we've been going time and again to the IMF, which is about 12 times in 28 years. How do we break out of that cycle? We have a population of 207 million. We talk of a big youth bulge. That is another opportunity we have. We have a foundation. A strong domestic industry can be the foundation of exports and import substitution. We've been on a declining trend for manufacturing, so how can that be arrested? Pakistan's economy is consumption driven and we're very import reliant. We need to change that. And Pakistan's share in world exports, we've been losing our share, and other countries have gained. So the key questions that the Ministry of Commerce, since this discussion is about our trade policy, but to kind of make it more real, the trade policy in actual terms is what the Ministry of Commerce will be doing over the next 5 years, and what steps can we suggest that the Ministry of Commerce can take. So can the Ministry of Commerce propel more exports? Can the Ministry of Commerce minimize imports, particularly of luxury goods, so that we don't have to go into the regime of regulatory duties every now and then? Can we have a more consistent policy of what we can bring into our economy so that it doesn't even put pressure on our external account? Other than that, can we provide cover to the local manufacturing? Yes, it is very important, not only for the large-scale manufacturing, but also for small and middle-sized industry, that they be given the time and opportunity to grow and scale. And of course, last but not the least, Pakistan's brand abroad. How is our country and our product particularly, how is it perceived in the foreign market, and what can the Ministry of Commerce and the Board of Investment do to improve that? Moving on, the key message here in this slide is that we are deindustrializing. It's very evident from the trajectory that it's going downward. So at the moment, the percentage share of general manufacturing in our economy is, in the GDP, is 13.45%, whereas the percentage share of large-scale manufacturing is 10.7%. Now, there is clearly insufficient growth in manufacturing, and how can the Ministry of Commerce help in reversing this trend? Now, one thing that we have spoken of is renegotiating the FTAs. So we try and improve our market access to other countries. But we've also negotiated with countries like Thailand and Turkey. And we are also cognizant that the lines of exports, as I just mentioned, are very thin. So is FTA was it the best tool to use to grow our exports? That's the question number one to ask, now that we're in the phase of renegotiating. So again, and then of course, speaking about GSP Plus, as per the Pakistan Business Council's calculation, even if we divert all of our exports from the textiles sector to the EU under the GSP Plus regime, our share in the EU market for our in the overall market for clothing in the EU will increase from the current 4% to a maximum of 7%. So what is really the potential in GSP Plus? Perhaps it is not a long-term solution for us. And of course, the trade policy has to look into what opportunities we have domestically. So how can we do better domestically? Because in order to nurture in local industry, the local market has to be fully captured. and worked on. So how can we do better? And it's so good to see that these days we have new stores that have come up, we have better products that have come up, particularly in apparel, and that is something that's heartening. So we need to look into our domestic commerce and make it better, and we need to focus on Buy Pakistani. Moving on, so this is again a chart that talks about how the FTAs have not worked in our favor and our trade balances have grown. This slide talks about the investment as GDP and how we're not doing very well regionally, and our investment to GDP is at a low of about 15%. The cross-link here I want to point out is with the Board of Investment and the Honorable Chairman Board of Investment amongst us. There is a cross-link between the Ministry of Commerce and the Board of Investment to work on improving brand Pakistan. So that will generate more interest in the Pakistani market, and this could be part of the trade policy. Talking about under-invoicing, this is another issue that we felt was important to mention in the trade policy, or address in it rather. Of course, we have this perennial problem of under-invoicing, which is hurting our revenues. Now, what is the solution? Well, that's a good question to ask, and of course, this is something that the government has been looking into. The problem is multifaceted. One is under-invoicing, whereby at the source, the originator under-invoices, but the other one is also the fact that there's alternative systems of money transfer, right? So when those alternative systems of money transfer are used, then the transfer does not come up on paper, and hence we see a difference in the reported values. Now, this is an issue, but for the benefit of generating more revenues, we need to address this as part of the trade policy, and of course, this is also should be part of the fiscal policy, which also kind of goes to the point that there is a cross-link between how the Ministry of Commerce can work with the FBR and the State Bank of Pakistan to resolve this problem. Moving on, there is also a cross-linkage with the agriculture policy. Now, we do have a textile, and even though we have a narrow base of exports, textile happens to be our major contributor. So how can we do better on textiles? Well, one thing would be we produce more cotton, right? And whether we do that by increasing the size of arable land and invest more in making more arable land for cotton, well, that is one, or if we move towards cross-substitution. The chart here shows, of course, regionally, and the comparison here is with India, whereby you see a continual rise in the production of cotton in India. Well, let's focus on also producing more cotton. So I would like to sum up, and I don't want to kind of use too much time. I'm just going to sum it up by saying the Pakistan Business Council has given specific recommendations. I've already spoken about how there's cross-linkages with all different types of policies, but and of course we can talk about different fiscal measures, particularly simplifying and consolidating taxes, separating tax policy from the administration, abolishing presumptive taxes, and tightening valuation of to control under-invoicing, but also in trade and energy and labor and agriculture. As I've spoken, there's a lot of steps that can be cross-linked between the policies. Here are some particular priority areas and actions that the ministry, that PBC informed Ministry of Commerce about, and requested that these could be looked into. So in order to, for example, so the first recommendation was that the import policies need to dovetail into the export strategy to promote conversion value addition and to make duty drawback easier. And to move from transactional short-term export packages to more long-term transformational policies. In the past, in the previous trade policies, we've had very makeshift and very short-term export packages to put a blip on the chart, but we need to have a more consistent approach to say we will continue this policy for a good 4-5 years and let it then show its results. So we can't really look for quick wins here. Second and thirdly, we also want to propose in the trade policy to say that in order to attract Chinese investors into local addition and to leverage lower labor costs and offset our trade imbalance. So we want to propose that we attract more Chinese investors into joint ventures, into more local manufacturing in the apparel, in the light engineering, and the domestic appliance component manufacturing space. These are 3 areas, but of course we want to look at new areas also. So what could the new areas be? Those could be man-made fibers, as was discussed earlier. Then we look at pharmaceuticals and medical devices. Another area we could collaborate on. There's been very good news that our government, in collaboration with the Pakistan Chemical Manufacturers Association, is planning on setting up in the next 4 to 5 years a naphtha cracker plant, which will help us produce our own plastic resin. Yes, we need to move into more plastics, and then livestock dairy and fruits and vegetable processing. So I'm just going to wrap up there, and I want to thank you for the time and listening to me. Thank you.